6 months had passed amidst the wedding ceremony, and Queen Sathra had kept her promise to ignore her human husband as completely as possible. But the universe had other plans, the joint flagship sovereignties. Edge carried both Velkari and human crew members through the contested Andara sector, and tensions between the two species remained high despite the official alliance. And Sathra spent most of her time in the command center, pretending that Marcus Cole did not exist. But then the Drathkar appeared. 12 enemy warships dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the fleet, their weapons already charging, and Admiral Verthax shouted orders while the Velkari warriors scrambled to battle stations. "They have us surrounded," Verthax reported, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Their formation is perfect. There is no way through." Sathra stood at the center of the command deck, her 4 eyes analyzing the tactical display with growing anger, because he was right. And the Drathkar had trapped them with a classic pincer formation that left no escape route. "We fight our way through," she declared. "Concentrate all firepower on the lead ship and create an opening." "That will not work," a voice said from behind Hirsch. She turned to find Marcus Cole standing at one of the auxiliary stations, his eyes fixed on a secondary display that showed detailed readouts of the enemy formation. "You forget your place." "Human," Verthax snarled. "This is a military matter. Go hide with the civilians. Look at their energy signatures," Marcus said, ignoring the insult and pointing at his screen. "The lead ships are running at maximum power, but the 2 vessels on the far left flank are operating at 60%, which means their engines are damaged or they are conserving fuel for a long pursuit." Sathra found herself moving toward his station despite her better judgment. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "The Drathkar expect you to do exactly what Admiral Varthax proposed," Marcus explained. "They want you to charge the center so they can collapse the flanks and crush you. But if we redirect all power to our rear shields and accelerate directly at that weak point on the left, we can break through before they can adjust their formation. That is suicide," Verthax protested. "We would be exposing our backs to their main fleet for approximately 90 seconds. Marcus agreed, which is exactly how long it will take for their heavier ships to turn and pursue. And by then, we will be past them and into the asteroid field, where their superior numbers mean nothing." Sathra studied the tactical display with new eyes, running the calculations in her mind, and she realized with a start that the human was right. "Do it," she commanded. "Your Majesty." Verthax exclaimed in shock. "I gave an order, Admiral," Sathra said, her voice cold and sharp. "Execute, Commander." Cole's strategy now. What followed was chaos and fire, and the screening of metal under stress. But when the smoke cleared, the Sovereignty's Edge and most of its escort fleet had escaped into the asteroid field, while 4 Drathkar ships drifted in pieces behind them. The command deck erupted in cheers from both Velkari and human crew members. And for a moment, the barriers between species seemed to disappear entirely. Sathra found Marcus at his station, calmly reviewing damage reports as if he had not just saved 3,000 lives. "Where did you learn to read tactical formations like that?" she asked. "I grew up on a colony world near Drathkar space," he replied. "We learned to recognize their patterns or we did not survive. And my parents did not survive, so I made sure to learn very well." Something shifted in Sathra's chest, an unfamiliar sensation that she did not want to examine too closely. "You have my thanks, Commander Cole," she said formally. He looked up at her with those strange human eyes, and for the first time she noticed that they were the color of a forest moon she had visited as a child. "Green and brown and somehow warm, Marcus," he said. "If we are going to be married for another 9.5 years, you might as well use my name." Despite herself, Sathra almost smiled in the weeks that followed. She found herself seeking out his company more often, telling herself it was merely strategic, because a commander who could outthink the Drathkar was valuable regardless of species. She taught him the ancient war poems of her people, and he listened with genuine interest and asked questions that showed he truly wanted to understand. And in turn, he shared human music and literature that was so different from anything she had known, yet somehow beautiful in its own fragile way. Your Shakespeare wrote about love and death and power, she observed one evening in her private study. These themes are universal, it seems. Humans have been asking the same questions for thousands of years. Marcus agreed. We just have not figured out the answers yet. Perhaps that is why you keep reaching for the stars. Sather said. You think the answers are out there somewhere? Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe we just hate sitting still. She laughed, and it surprised her because it was not the mocking laughter she had used when they first met, but something genuine and warm one. Night after a particularly brutal battle that left them both exhausted and emotionally raw. They found themselves alone in her quarters with adrenaline still pumping through their veins. And what happened next was something neither of them had planned or expected afterward. Sather lay in the darkness and tried to convince herself it meant nothing. Velhari and human biology were completely incompatible according to every scientist in the Empire. And what they had done was merely a release of tension between two warriors who had faced death together. Nothing more significant than that. This changes nothing, she said into the silence. Of course not, Marcus agreed, but his voice was soft, and his hand found hers in the darkness. She did not pull away. It was just one night. She told herself, just curiosity and adrenaline and the strange bond that forms between soldiers who fight side by side. It could not possibly mean anything more than that. Could not possibly have any consequences. She was absolutely certain of this. The royal physician was an ancient Velkhari woman named Hetha, who had served 3 generations of queens, and her hands had never trembled in 500 years of medical practice. But they trembled now as she stared at the bioscanner results. Run the test again, Sather commanded from the examination table. I have run it 7 times. Your Majesty, Hetha replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The results are the same every time. Sather felt the room spinning around her, even though she was lying perfectly still. Because what Hetha was suggesting was not possible. It simply was not possible according to everything they knew about biology and genetics and the fundamental differences between species. There must be a malfunction in the equipment, Sather insisted. Or contamination in the samples. Or some error in the calibration. I used 3 different scanners, Hetha said, finally meeting her queen's eyes. And I consulted the medical database of every known species in the Galactic Concord. And the results are undeniable. Your Majesty, you are carrying a child, a hybrid child, and the genetic markers clearly show contributions from both Velkhari and human DNA. Sather sat up so quickly that the medical instruments attached to her arms tore free, and she ignored the purple blood that dripped from the small wounds as she grabbed Hetha by the collar of her medical coat. This stays between us, she hissed. You will speak of this to no one. Do you understand? Of course, Your Majesty, Hetha gasped. But you will need prenatal care, and the pregnancy will eventually become visible, and the court will notice when their queen begins to show signs of carrying an heir. Sather released her and stepped back, her mind racing through possibilities, and none of them good. How had this happened? Every scientific study for the past 1,000 years had confirmed that Velkhari could not reproduce with humans, and the genetic structures were too different. The chromosomes were incompatible. The basic cellular machinery operated on completely different principles, and yet the evidence was growing inside her at this very moment. She placed a hand over her stomach and felt nothing yet. No movement or presence. Just the same flat muscular abdomen she had always had. But according to the scans, there was a tiny cluster of cells dividing and multiplying and becoming something that should not exist. Leave me, she ordered Hetha, and remember what I said about silence. If I hear even a whisper of this from anyone else, I will know where it came from." The physician bowed and fled the medical bay, and Sathra was left alone with her impossible truth. For a long moment she simply stood there, trying to process what had happened. And then rage bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her, and she slammed her fist into the wall, hard enough to crack the reinforced metal. This was the human's fault. Somehow he had done something to her, some genetic manipulation or biological trickery that his primitive species had developed. And she would make him pay for this violation of her body and her bloodline. She stormed through the corridors of the ship, her 4 eyes blazing with fury, and crew members of both species scrambled to get out of her way as she made her way to Marcus's quarters. The door slid open before she could knock it down, and Marcus stood there in casual clothes with a cup of something hot in his hands, and his expression shifted from surprise to concern when he saw her face. "Sathra, what happened?" he asked. "Are you injured? There is blood on your arm. What did you do to me?" she demanded, shoving past him into his quarters and letting the door close behind them. "I do not understand," he said, setting down his cup. "What are you talking about?" "You poisoned me somehow," she accused. "Some human genetic weapon or reproductive virus. Some trick your scientists developed to compromise other species." Marcus's confusion appeared genuine, and that only made her angrier. "Sathra, please calm down and tell me what is happening," he said. Reaching for her hand, she slapped his arm away. "I'm pregnant," she shouted, and the words seemed to echo in the small room. "With your child, which is impossible, which should not be able to happen. So either you explain to me right now what you did, or I will tear this ship apart until I find the truth." Marcus stood perfectly still, and she watched his face cycle through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, disbelief, confusion, and then something she did not expect at all. Wonder. His eyes went to her stomach and then back to her face. And when he spoke, his voice was soft and full of something that sounded almost like awe. "You are pregnant," he repeated, "with our child. Did you hear nothing I said?" Sathra demanded. "This is your doing somehow. You tricked me." "I did nothing," Marcus insisted. "I am just as shocked as you are. But Sathra, this is incredible. This is a miracle. No human and Valkyrie have ever created life together before. It is not a miracle, it is a disaster," she exclaimed, and to her horror, she felt moisture gathering in her eyes. "My empire will see this as a weakness, as proof that I have been compromised by an inferior species. And my enemies will use this against me, and the traditionalists will demand I step down from the throne." Marcus moved closer, slowly and carefully, like he was approaching a wounded predator. And this time, when he reached for her, she did not pull away. "Then we face it together," he said simply. "You do not understand," Sathra said, and her voice cracked in a way that made her hate herself. "They will want to kill it. They will want to kill you, and they might even try to kill me for allowing this to happen. I understand perfectly," Marcus replied, "and I am telling you that I will stand beside you no matter what comes, because that is what humans do for their families." Sathra looked down at him. This small, fragile creature, who should have been terrified, but instead looked at her with steady determination. And she remembered the battle where he had saved her fleet with nothing but his mind and his courage. "Impossible things are humanity's specialty," he said, "and apparently so are impossible children. Despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the uncertainty." Sathra felt something shift in her heart. She was the most powerful queen in 3 star systems, and she was afraid of what grew inside her, afraid of what it meant and what it would cost. But for the first time in her long life, she was not facing that fear alone. Her hand moved to her stomach again, and this time Marcus placed his hand over hers, and together they stood in silence, contemplating the impossible future they had somehow created. The throne room of the Valkyrie Empire stretched higher than any human building ever made, And Queen Saithra sat upon her obsidian throne like a goddess carved from living shadow, her 4 golden eyes scanning the small delegation that had dared to enter her domain. She was 8 feet of pure warrior royalty, her dark blue skin covered in ancient ceremonial armor that had been worn by 12 generations of queens before her. And when she moved even slightly, the guards around the room tensed with respect and fear. "So this is what the Galactic Concord sends me," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. A human commander, Marcus Cole, stood at the center of the throne room, his dress uniform crisp and his posture perfect, despite the fact that the alien queen towered over him by 2 full feet. And he did not flinch when her eyes locked onto him with obvious contempt. The Concord ambassador, a nervous 4-armed creature named Vex, stepped forward with a tablet in his trembling hands. "Your Majesty, the treaty requires a formal union between your empire and the human coalition to secure the Andara trade routes," Vex explained, his voice shaking. "A political marriage would satisfy both parties and prevent the Drathkor from exploiting the divide between your peoples." Saithra leaned forward on her throne, and her lips curled into a smile that showed rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. "You want me to marry this creature?" she asked, and then she laughed. The sound filled the massive chamber like thunder, bouncing off the walls and echoing until every person present could feel it in their bones. And her guards joined in with their own rumbling laughter while the human delegation stood in uncomfortable silence. "Your Majesty," Marcus spoke, his voice calm and steady, "I understand your hesitation." "Hesitation?" Saithra rose from her throne and descended the steps with the grace of a predator, each footfall sending small vibrations through the stone floor until she stood directly before him, forcing him to crane his neck upward to meet her gaze. "I have no hesitation, little human. I have amusement." She circled him slowly, examining him the way one might examine an insect that had wandered into a palace. "Your species lives for what? 80 years if you are lucky," she asked. "My grandmother is 900 years old and still hunts wild beasts on the northern moons. And you expect me to bind myself to a creature who will wither and die before I finish my morning meditation?" Marcus remained still as she completed her circle and stopped in front of him again. "The treaty does not require love, Your Majesty," he replied. "Only cooperation and children?" One of her advisors called out from the side of the room. "The Concord's treaty mentions the possibility of heirs to cement the alliance." This time, Saithra's laughter was sharp and mocking. "Children!" she exclaimed, turning to face her court. "They want me to bear this human's offspring, as if such a thing were even possible. As if I would pollute 10,000 years of royal bloodline with the seed of a species that learned to walk upright mere moments ago in cosmic terms." She spun back to face Marcus, leaning down until her face was inches from his, her 4 eyes boring into his 2 with undisguised disdain. "Let me be perfectly clear, Commander Cole," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow still carried through the entire room. "You are here because my empire needs access to your coalition's jump gate technology, and your coalition needs our protection from the Drathkor. Nothing more." "I understand," Marcus said. "You will have quarters in the West Wing," she continued, straightening to her full height. "You will attend formal functions when required. You will smile for the diplomatic cameras, and you will stay out of my way. And if you are very fortunate, you will survive long enough to see this farce of a marriage annulled when the treaty expires in 10 years. And if the Drathkor attack before then—" Marcus asked. Saithra paused, and for the first time something other than contempt flickered across her features. "Then you will hide with the other non-combatants while my warriors handle the threat," she said. "Your species is good at surviving. I will grant you that much. Like insects that scatter when the light comes on." The Concord ambassador cleared his throat nervously. The ceremony will take place in 3 days, Vex announced. Representatives from 47 species will attend to witness the union. Make sure there is enough alcohol, Saithra said. Returning to her throne, I will need it to endure standing beside a human for more than an hour. She waved her hand in dismissal. Take him to his quarters. And make sure he understands that the East Wing is forbidden, that the training grounds are forbidden, and that my private chambers are obviously forbidden. Marcus bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. Thank you for your hospitality. Your Majesty, he said without a trace of sarcasms. The guards escorted him from the throne room. Saithra watched him go with narrowed eyes, and her chief advisor approached the throne with careful steps. He did not react to your insults, the advisor observed. Most species would have shown anger or fear. He is merely foolish, Saithra replied. Or perhaps humans are simply too primitive to recognize when they are being mocked. But even as she said it, she found herself troubled by the steadiness in those strange human eyes, the complete lack of intimidation in his posture, the way he had spoken to her as if she was simply another person rather than the most powerful being in 3 star systems. Keep guards on him at all times, she ordered. I do not trust any creature that does not know when to be afraid. The advisor bowed and retreated. And Saithra was left alone with her thoughts on the great obsidian throne. 3 days later, she would be married to a human, a political puppet bound to her by treaty and necessity. And the very thought made her stomach turn with disgust. She had conquered worlds and commanded fleets that could burn entire planets to ash. And now she was reduced to this theatrical farce. But it was only for 10 years, she reminded herself. And then she would be free of him forever. What could possibly go wrong in 10 short years? The secret lasted exactly 3 weeks before someone in the medical bay talked. And then the news spread across the Velkari Empire like fire through dry grass. Burning everything it touched, Queen Saithra carries a human's child. The words were spoken in horror and disgust in the great halls of the homeworld, in whispered conversations between admirals, in emergency meetings of the High Council. And by the time Saithra learned that her secret was out, the Empire was already splitting apart. Half of the Council demanded immediate action. Terminate the pregnancy, execute the human, and purify the royal bloodline, before this abomination could damage their civilization's reputation among the stars. The other half saw something different. In the genetic analysis that the royal physicians had been forced to share, the hybrid child showed unprecedented cellular regeneration, enhanced neural development, and immune system markers that suggested resistance to diseases that had plagued both species for centuries. This child could be the next evolution of our people, one council member argued. The combination of Velkari strength and human adaptability might create something greater than either species alone, or it could be a monster. Another shouted back, a corruption of everything we have built over 10,000 years. General Vorthax watched the debate with cold, calculating eyes, and he had already made his decision long before the council finished arguing. He was Saithra's cousin by blood and had coveted the throne since childhood. And now the universe had handed him the perfect excuse to take it, 3 days after the secret became public. Vorthax made his mother Saithra was on the observation deck of the Sovereignty's edge when the proximity alarms began screaming, and she looked out the viewport to see 20 Velkari warships dropping out of hyperspace in attack formation around her flagship. What is the meaning of this? She demanded over the communication channel. Vorthax's face appeared on the main screen, his expression a mask of false sorrow. Cousin, it pains me to do this, he said, but you have left me no choice. The royal bloodline must be protected, and you have proven yourself unfit to wear the crown. You dare to threaten your queen? Saithra snarled. I dare to save my people from a half-breed abomination, Vorthax replied. Surrender the human to me for execution. Allow the royal physicians to terminate the pregnancy, and I will permit you to live out your days in exile rather than face public execution for genetic treason. Marcus appeared at Sather's side, and he had somehow obtained a weapon and tactical armor despite being a diplomatic figure rather than a soldier. The Queen does not negotiate with traitors, he said. Thax laughed. The human speaks for you now? He mocked. This is exactly why you must be removed. You have become infected by their weakness. Sathra felt her rage building, but she also felt Marcus's hand on her arm, steady and grounding. How many ships do we have? She asked their tactical officer quietly. 7, came the reply. Against his 20. And half of our crew may be loyal to him rather than you. The odds were impossible, and Verthax knew it. And his smile grew wider with each passing second, but Marcus was already moving toward the tactical station, his mind working through the problem the same way it had during the Drathkar ambush. Your cousin's ships are in a standard siege formation, he observed, which means he expects us to either surrender or try to flee. And he has positioned his fastest interceptors along the most obvious escape routes. So there is no escape. The tactical officer said grimly. There is always an escape, Marcus replied. If you are willing to do something your enemy thinks is insane. He pulled up a holographic display of the surrounding space, showing the position of every ship in 3 dimensions. The asteroid mining station at coordinates 773. He said, pointing to a small structure that appeared insignificant among the massive warships. What is its current status? Abandoned, the tactical officer answered. The miners evacuated when our fleet arrived in the sector. And its fuel reserves? There was a pause as the officer checked the records. Fully stocked, she reported with growing confusion. Approximately 2 million tons of refined hydrogen, Marcus smiled. And it was not a pleasant expression. Open a channel to Verthax Hess fleet, he instructed, and prepare to broadcast on all frequencies. Sathra watched him work with a mixture of fascination and something else she did not want to name. Something that felt dangerously close to admiration. This is Commander Marcus Cole of the Human Coalition, he announced when the channel opened. To all ships currently surrounding the Sovereignty's edge, I want you to know exactly what is about to happen. Verthax's face appeared on screen again, irritated by the interruption. You have nothing to say that interests me. Human, I have already programmed a firing solution to detonate the fuel reserves of the mining station at coordinates 773, Marcus continued calmly. The resulting explosion will create a plasma wave that will destroy everything within 50,000 kilometers, including this ship. And I have given this firing solution to officers loyal to Queen Sathra with instructions to execute it if we are attacked or if I am killed. You are bluffing, Verthax scoffed. But his eyes had gone uncertain. Humans do not bluff when it comes to protecting our families, Marcus replied. And that child growing inside your queen is my family. And I will burn this entire sector to ash before I let you harm either of them. The silence that followed stretched for an eternity. Then, one by one, ships in Verthax's fleet began to break formation. Their captains unwilling to die for a general who had not warned them they might be facing mutual destruction. You would kill yourself and your queen to protect the child that has not even been born yet? Verthax demanded in disbelief, without hesitation. Marcus confirmed Verthax's face contorted with rage. But his fleet was falling apart around him. And when his own flagship's captain announced that she was standing down, the general had no choice but to retreat. The coup crumbled in less than 6 hours. And when it was over, Sathra turned to Marcus with an expression he had never seen on her face before. You would really have done it, she said. You would have killed us all. I would have done whatever was necessary to keep you and our child safe. he replied. Simply Zathra reached out and pulled him into an embrace that would have crushed a lesser man. And when she finally released him, there were tears on her face that she did not bother to hide. I chose better than I knew when I agreed to this marriage, she admitted. Impossible things. Marcus reminded her with a slight smile. Humanity's specialty. The twin suns of the Valkyrie homeworld rose over the ancient birthing temple, where queens had brought their children into the world for 10,000 years. And on this day, the gathered crowd was larger than any in recorded history, because everyone wanted to witness the impossible. Zathra labored for 14 hours while Marcus held her hand and refused to leave her side. Despite the protests of the traditional midwives who insisted that males had no place in the sacred chamber, he stays. Zathra had growled between contractions, and no one dared argue with a queen in the middle of giving birth. When the child finally emerged, the head midwife held her up to the light, and the room fell completely silent. The baby was smaller than a pure Valkyrie infant, but larger than a human newborn. And her skin was a softer shade of blue than her mother's, almost like the color of a morning sky. And when she opened her eyes, they revealed 4 golden irises that somehow contained the warmth of her father's green-brown gaze. She had tiny ridges along her brow that would one day become the proud crest of a Valkyrie warrior. But her face held the softer features of human ancestry. And when she looked up at her parents, she did not cry, but instead made a sound that was almost like singing. "She is beautiful," Marcus whispered. And there were tears streaming down his face. Zathra reached for her daughter with trembling arms. And when she held the child against her chest, she felt something she had never experienced before. A love so fierce and overwhelming that it seemed to rewrite everything she had ever believed about strength and power. "Valmyra," she announced, and her voice carried the ancient harmonics that gave names their sacred weight in Valkyrie culture. Her name is Valmyra, which means bridge between stars. Word spread quickly from the temple, and within hours the entire empire knew that the hybrid child had been born healthy and wholesome. Celebrated this news as a sign of hope and progress, while others cursed it as the beginning of the end for their civilization. But no one could deny the simple truth that the impossible had become reality. The formal presentation to the empire came 3 days later, when Zathra appeared on the great balcony of the Crystal Palace with Marcus at her side and their daughter in her arms. Below them stretched a crowd of millions, both Valkyrie and human, and dozens of other species who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness this moment. And the holographic broadcast reached billions more on worlds scattered throughout known space. Zathra looked down at the sea of faces and remembered the contempt she had felt when she first met Marcus. The certainty that humans were nothing more than primitive creatures unworthy of her attention. How wrong she had been. "My people," she began, and her voice echoed across the massive plaza and through every speaker on every world that carried the broadcast. "I stand before you today as your queen, as a mother, and as a partner to a human male. And I know that many of you have questions and concerns about what this means for our empire." The crowd was silent, waiting. "I once believed, as many of you still believe," Zathra continued, "that humans were lesser beings, that their short lives and fragile bodies made them unworthy of respect. And I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "I have watched this human stand beside me in battle and offer strategies that save thousands of Valkyrie lives. And I have watched him learn our language and our customs with genuine respect rather than mere obligation. And I have watched him face death itself rather than allow harm to come to me or our child." She lifted Valmyra higher so that the cameras could capture her image and broadcast it to the stars. "This child is not a corruption of our bloodline," Zathra declared. "She is proof that when two species find common ground, they can create something greater than either could achieve alone." and she carries within her the strength of Valkyrie warriors and the stubborn determination of human survivors. Marcus stepped forward to stand beside her, and he did not speak because he knew this moment belonged to Saithra. But his presence said everything that words could not. The Galactic Concord has spent centuries trying to unite the many species of known space through treaties and trade agreements and political marriages. Saithra said, and those efforts have mostly failed because they were built on paper and promises rather than genuine connection. She looked down at her daughter, who had fallen asleep in her arms with perfect peaceful trust. But this child is different. This child is built on love and sacrifice and the courage to believe that the impossible can become reality. And any who threaten her will face the combined might of the Valkyrie Empire and the human coalition, united as one. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the foundations of the ancient palace. And for the first time in galactic history, the voices of humans and Valkyrie rose together in celebration of something they had created together in the months that followed. Ambassadors from across the Concord arrived to meet the hybrid princess and to discuss the implications of her. Existent scientists studied her genetics and marveled at the way her DNA had combined the best traits of both species while somehow avoiding the complications that should have made her existence impossible. Politicians debated what her birth meant for the future of interspecies relations, and whether other hybrids might be possible between different combinations of the galaxy's many peoples. But Marcus and Saithra paid little attention to the politics and the science, because they were too busy raising their daughter and watching her grow into someone extraordinary. When historians later asked Marcus what he believed humanity's greatest strength to be, he would smile and look at his wife and daughter before answering. "We make the impossible inevitable," he would say. "We look at the universe and all its rules and limitations, and we decide that those rules do not apply to us. And then we do whatever it takes to prove ourselves right." Saithra would add her own thoughts when prompted. "I spent centuries believing that strength meant standing alone and needing no one," she would say. "But the humans taught me that true strength lies in connection, in allowing yourself to be vulnerable with those you trust, and in building something together that neither of you could have built alone." And Valmyra, the bridge between stars, would grow up to become the greatest leader the Galactic Concord had ever known. A queen who embodied the best of two worlds and who spent her long life proving that the universe was full of impossible things waiting to become reality. All it took was the courage to reach for them all. It took was the stubborn refusal to accept that some things could never be done. All it took was love, which humans had always understood better than anyone, and which they generously shared with anyone willing to accept it.